We're here at CPAC,
Yep.
and in your view, what do you think are some of the major driving issues today that are, really pulling people to say, I want to be engaged in the conservative movement in America?
So it's a very simple question. Whatever your pet rock is, I'm a big gun guy, so the Second Amendment, whether it's freedom of speech, whether it's the economy, migration, retirement funds, whatever it is, you have to understand that everything is in danger. And if you don't get engaged personally, then I'm sorry to say you're part of the problem. Being engaged as a patriot is about political activity. It's not voting every 2 years or writing a check to a candidate. My wife, for example, detests politics. She's very sane, okay? I've been trying to tell her for a decade, get involved in politics. You've got a much better demeanor than I do. I've got high blood pressure. I don't bear fools gladly. And she said, no, that's never going to happen. Last year, she declared to me that she's running for the board of the local community center. And I said, what do you mean you've decided? Haven't you read St. Paul's letter? I mean, you have to obey your husband, and you're asking me for permission, correct? She said, no, I've registered, I've got the signatures. Why? Because she found out that the local library that we pay for is having drag queen story hour for children. And she said, for children? Why is a sexually explicit act relevant to minors? And she said, no, I'm going to run for office. So whatever the issue is, Second Amendment, the economy, the border, get engaged. I don't care if you're running for the local library, for the county commissioner. We have to take back America, one district, one school board at a time. And if we look at the organizations that don't represent us when they say they do, like AARP, that are actually running massive scams with regards to all the kickbacks they get for the certain policies they promote with their members. We need more people like AMAC to wake other Americans up. So get engaged. It's our country. I'm not talking about party politics. I'm talking about love of America.
There's a real difference between the two sides, between those who are on the Democrat ticket and those on the Republican ticket. And it is such a great divide. It really is the difference. In my view, I think that there is such a spiritual war occurring.
Yes.
I haven't seen a division like this. And we see it, we all have a family member or a friend who is buying into the lie.
My mother-in-law.
That
Totally.
Go ahead.
Let's take politics out of the equation. I've said this every week on my radio show. It's not about whether you're a Republican now or a Democrat, although the Democrat Party of today is not your fathers, your grandfathers. JFK wouldn't be allowed. Scoop Jackson wouldn't be allowed in today's radical Democrat Party. But the dividing line is right. The dividing line is very simple. Outside of politics, do you love America? Do you think it's the greatest nation on God's earth? Or do you hate it? That's the dividing line. We are in a perverse situation that no civilization has ever survived before, where the elite running the country, the people in the White House, the people running the departments, hate the country they are in charge of. Could you imagine if, they have a new CEO for Coca-Cola and he hates Coca-Cola? How perverse is that? The new president of McDonald's hates McDonald's. What would he do? He would dismantle that organization. And here's the sad question you have to ask yourself if you look at the last 2 years. What would this administration do differently if their goal was to destroy America? And the answer to that question is not much.
I think they've got it covered.
Right. I think they're working quite well. Think one thing I did on my Newsmax show, on the back of an envelope, and then we made this big graphic. I'm a national security guy. That's my background. Defense Department, White House, British military. Since World War II ended, if you look at every war that Americans have been engaged in, that's from Korea to post 9/11. So that's Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Afghanistan. If you add up all of our combat fatalities, every soldier, airman, Coast Guard, Marine who's died since 1945, the total for 70 years is 103,000 Americans. 103. According to the CDC, Biden CDC, last year, 110,000 Americans were poisoned by fentanyl coming across our border. More Americans have been murdered by Chinese fentanyl coming across the border in 12 months than died in all of our wars since we won World War II. If that isn't a wake-up call to the destruction of America, I truly, Rebecca, I don't know what is.
And shame on media for not, for mainstream media, for the CNNs and the MSNBCs of the world, for not highlighting this, both in verbal and written, which is why it's so important that you share this on your shows. You have an authoritative voice on the subject, and it's so very important. Now, when we look at the 2024, and that's where I have hope. That's where I'm optimistic.
Well, that's why we're at AMAC. We come here to recharge, at CPAC, that's why we come here to recharge our batteries.
That's right. So looking ahead now at 2024, and we know that we've got a couple of people now that have entered the race.
Yes.
How crowded do you think it'll get? And what do you think how it's all going to boil down? Will that hurt, perhaps, the conservative movement if we see that we've got 20, let's say, people running in the primary?
I've never understood that logic because I find it amusing that people are anointing nominees right now. Now, don't get me wrong, I worked as Deputy Assistant to President Trump, so he's got my vote. I aim for him to come back because he needs to truly drain the swamp, destroy the deep state, and do the unfinished work of the first 4 years. But as an immigrant to America, why do I have to remind my fellow conservatives, there's a thing called primaries? It's part of our history. I love 2015 was fun. Didn't you enjoy 2015?
Oh, yes.
17 people, men and women, up on the stage, duking it out. Toughest guy or gal, last one standing is the nominee. That's how it should be. So personally, I'm looking forward to that. I don't care whether it's 17 or 27. I think I know who's going to win. But at the end of the day, anybody who runs on the right has to achieve something quite difficult. Because look at what President Trump did. How do you differentiate yourself from President Trump? Is it you don't want the strongest economy the world has ever seen? You don't want secure borders? You don't want to defeat ISIS? You don't want highest employment for minorities and women since record-keeping began? How do you create a better America than the one we had before COVID? This is going to be the challenge. And if you're going to say, well, we like somebody who doesn't do mean tweets, I think stopping 110,000 fentanyl deaths is a little bit more important than how somebody tweets. Personally, I don't know.
Well,
what do you think?
Well, Dr. Gorka, we're talking about the 2024 election. AMAC Action, which is the advocacy affiliate of AMAC, we've been heavily involved in election integrity issues in states throughout the country. And we made some progress. I had Hans van Spakovsky of the Heritage Foundation. And I asked him, what did you think of, did we make progress? And definitely we did. States like Texas, states like Georgia that implemented voter ID rules successfully and then surveys were taking in Georgia, and people verified that they virtually had no problem with voting. There's still a lot of work to be done. We engaged our members. We sent 12,000 of our members to become poll observers and election election workers. And we're just getting started here.
Good.
I guess my question is, we're going to have whoever's going to be the nominee. It's going to be a good candidate.
Yeah.
All right. And then so the next step is, how confident do you feel that these elections will go off, as fair as possible, or what kind of problems do you foresee? I mean, this is because the last thing we want to do is disenfranchise voters saying my vote's not going to count. They're cheating anyways. Look what happened in 2020.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is what we're working hard to alleviate this.
Well, thank you for doing that. I'd love to get somebody from AMAC on my show to discuss that because that's incredibly important. So when President Trump announced that he's running in, early November, what was my wife doing? I was at Mar-a-Lago eating, the cocktail shrimp, waiting for the president to make his big announcement. My wife that day, this is what my wife did, who, as I said, hates politics. She woke up at 3:45, and in our county, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, she was the senior election officer, and we have that security system where I can see anybody moving in and out of the house. She leaves at 3:45 before I fly to Mar-a-Lago, and I see her on the cameras come back home at 10:30 at night. Well, I can guarantee you one thing. In the precinct where my wife was the unpaid chief election officer, there was no fraud. There was no cheating. If my wife can do that, who hates politics, every AMAC member, especially if you've got time on your hands, leave the grandkids with somebody else.
Yes.
And just for one day out of two, get certified and make sure that no cheating. The bad guys can't win if they cheat. if we stop them from cheating. They can't win. So it's really up to every single listener. And also educate. The idea after 2020 that we had to have Rudy Giuliani, friends of mine, Joe DeGeneva, Victoria Tunsing, tell members of the Senate, of the House in Pennsylvania, for example, excuse me, Mr. State Representative, you do know that according to the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of Pennsylvania, you are in charge of presidential elections. Not the Secretary of State, not the governor, not the local county commissioner. You run the Oh, really? I thought the governor did.
No.
Educate these people who don't understand that even in a presidential election, the states run the elections. Governors can't ride roughshod over our rights. In Virginia, where I live, how about this? The former Democrat governor, before the election, for the first time in history, said, we do not have to verify signatures on ballots. Now, why, whether it's a check at a bank, a signature on a contract, in a court of law, motivation is key. What is the only motivation for not verifying a signature? Fraud.
Right.
It's the only reason you wouldn't want to verify. Why are we suddenly not verifying signatures? Wake up, guys.
Right.
And he had no right to do that as the governor, but the GOP, the state reps,
they rolled. No,
they rolled.
Dr. Gorka, you'll be happy to know that AMAC Action Leadership, myself, my boss, and my colleague, Jennifer, we all work the polls in our respective precincts.
God bless.
It was a 5 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. job, and I'll admit, I was not looking forward to it, but at the end of the day, I'm going to do it again.
Good.
And so
that's how we win.
So is Jen, and so is Bob.
Thousands of AMAC poll watchers.
That's amazing.
Also participate.
God bless every single one of you.
Hey, it's just, I'm not breaking my arm, patting myself on the back. I'm saying, if I can do it, if your wife can do it, and I felt proud to do it.
Yeah.
And it totally changed my perspective on elections, and I can't wait to do it again.
Love it.
Dr. Sebastian Gorka, thank you for joining us. I can't wait to get on your show soon. Thank you again for that wonderful invitation.
We're going to make it happen.
I appreciate it so much. And thank you for being here. We appreciate you.
Thank you for AMAC.
Oh, God bless you.
Sunday night, Newsmax, every day, Salem. Thank you for your support, AMAC. And don't forget The War for America's Soul. That's my book. If you want to know where all of this insanity came from, read The War for America's Soul.